We don't have Yusuf's voice. He has
So,
already
can
started.
you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Okay, inshallah. So we'll get started. So Jazakallah khair, everyone, whoever is attending in person and whoever is attending online. Jazakallah khair for joining today for our Tarbiyah session this Sunday. So for this topic, it's a field that I don't know much about, but I know it has immense potential and immense value, which is basically the field of data science and how it's encroaching in many different fields of power. And this includes from the political realm to gauging society to, making decisions with enormous amounts of money behind it is all based on data and, and influencing people in whichever way possible. So what are the techniques behind it? In what sorts of ways is this being used? So inshallah, that's what Brother Yusuf is going to be talking about today and other surprises. So Brother Yusuf, if you could take it away.
Assalamu alaikum. So yeah, the main focus of my talk will be about electoral politics. However, at the end, I want to broaden that focus to include not just elections and voting, but any kind of political affairs or activism. If we go to the next slide. So we'll start the presentation with a question for the audience. So the Obama campaign in 2012, and this probably applies to, 2016, 2020, other campaigns too, but I got this from this book, which was written in 2012. The Obama campaign, they had the list of all 69,498,516 voters who voted for Obama in 2008. How did they get this list?
Did they have an online poll where you went there and voted whether you were voting for Obama or not?
So one of the audience said, did they have an online poll where people, could say if they voted for Obama or not? Potentially. Any other guesses? Did they hack the ballot boxes to get people's information? The answer, obviously, is data. So they were able to use the data that they had to produce this list of the voters because they were keeping track of every single person's information. They had hundreds of data points on every person, what their political preferences are, what their views are they inclined to vote or not, which politicians are they going to vote for, and we'll get into later how that all works. But after the election, they were able to see who voted, who didn't vote, and then they were able to produce a list. Okay, this is the 69 million whatever that voted for our candidate. Now, is there some fuzziness? Could there be some mistakes? Yes, but it's directionally correct, and these things are just getting better and better every time. And obviously, it's a lot better and easier to have that data and be able to make decisions with it than to be flying blind without that. So before we get into the technical details of all these things and how they work, I want to backtrack a little bit and talk more about the concept of democracy and voting and elections at a very high level. Now, back in high school, it's not working. Back in high school, they taught us that the first people to use democracy were the ancient Greeks. I don't know if that's still taught in high school or not. It is? Okay. What they didn't teach us is what did the ancient Greeks say about democracy. The Greek philosophers like Plato, Socrates, all those people, they had their own observations and experiences with democracy, and they wrote books based on this, in their view, was a failed experiment, and they actually were against it. They actually believed that democracy leads to autocracy in the end. Does anyone know why they believe this?
There's eventually going to be like one charismatic leader that's just going to get all the votes and then outplay everyone.
Yeah, it's kind of that similar thing where there's going to be somebody who comes along who knows how to manipulate the masses, who knows how to push the right buttons, who knows how to get people to vote the way that he wants them to vote. And this charismatic and clever person, what he's going to do is he's going to kind of push the people's buttons, and then once he aligns them in terms of getting them to vote the way he wants, he will eventually become like an autocrat who can do whatever he wants because he has these people in his back pocket. I would argue that, okay, what the Greeks were talking about were like one charismatic person. But imagine instead of one charismatic person, you have a whole system that's powered with data, with algorithms, with AI. And therefore your democracy is not about what the people want, whatever that means. It's more about how can we manipulate these people to vote and do the things that we want them to do. And that is, I would say, even more powerful than one charismatic person who has the skills in his mind of how to say the right things, because it's something that's very organized. It's very efficient. It's always improving all the time. It doesn't live and die with one person. It becomes a whole system that perpetuates itself. And I personally feel like that is kind of, when I talk about democracy, how it exists in the U.S. today, that is the form that we have, where it's basically an autocracy where the government can do whatever it wants, but it has the illusion of democracy because they're able to kind of manipulate people, get them to vote the way that the people in power want them to vote. Next slide. In addition, I did want to make one quick comment about the concept of public opinion, because we have heard, for example, in the case of Gaza, people talking about how there's a shift in public opinion, and the idea is that because it's a democracy, people are voting that this shift in public opinion will lead to some kind of change in policies or outcomes. I would argue it's not necessarily the case. We can go to the next slide. So what we call public opinion, there's no such thing as the people, right? Like that concept does not exist. Instead, what you have is you have hundreds of millions of people who all have different opinions on different things. Those opinions are changing, evolving. The relative importance and salience of different topics is always changing and evolving. And it's a very complex thing. And that's why these politicians in their campaigns are developing all these data algorithms to understand how these things shift and how to influence them and how to tap into those shifts. So we cannot view this from a one-dimensional perspective that, oh, okay, 2 years ago, 80% were with Israel and today it's 30%, therefore it's going to move from here to there. Like, that's not necessarily how it works. It's much more complex than that under the hood, and there's a lot more variables at play. One example is the Vietnam War, which Richard Nixon, he actually promised to end the Vietnam War in '68. He won the election, he backtracked on that promise, and then he escalated and even started expanding the war into Cambodia, the neighboring countries, but he still won a landslide victory. And that was because the war, despite the fact that American soldiers were dying, was a less relevant issue for the American voters as compared with law and order at home. And so because of the relative salience of that, he was able to win despite the fact that he went back on his prior promise to end the Vietnam War. Next slide. So for the next couple of slides, I will go through some infographics about how the kind of data gathering and stuff works. It's going to be a little bit technical, so feel free to stop me or ask any questions if you have any questions along the way. We can go to the next slide. So before I do that, I do want to give a quick history of how this has evolved and how recent this is. So until very recently, until probably the 1980s or 90s, U.S. electoral politics was based on what we call machine politics. And that's where you have certain power brokers, a union leader, someone who's the head of a particular ethnic group or religious group. And the politicians kind of talk to that person, get them on board, and then they bring with them 5,000 voters or 10,000 voters or whatever. This has evolved to become individual level, where just because a union leader is saying do this, their people are not necessarily going to follow them. And so for that reason, they've evolved from the machine politics into the individual level, what they call micro-targeting. That's the actual technical term that is used. So getting into the details, next slide, yeah, thank you. So how do they do this? So the first thing is they start with what's called the voter file. Now, the voter file is something that is publicly available information and is kept track of on a state-by-state and even county-by-county basis. So New York State has a voter file, and you can go to the New York State website and download that file. That file has the lists of everyone who's living in that state, if they're registered to vote or not, if they're registered, what party they're registered under, their history of turnout, like did this person vote in 2012, 2016, 2020, including the primaries as well, including the local elections as well. And then besides that, it just has some very basic demographic information, gender, date of birth, address, and usually that's pretty much it. So the voter file is the starting point, but that is sparse. Now, what these campaigns are doing is, first they'll clean it up to check for any mistakes. They'll actually purchase third-party databases from other sources. So, for example, you have consumer databases that advertisers that show you ads on Facebook or whatever, they rely on those databases. They have a profile that says, this person here, they're into guns. They're into collecting guns and ammo. And therefore, we're going to show them an ad on Facebook for this, which is their hobby, right? Now, the campaign that is doing this is going to purchase that data, match up the information with the voting data, and then create a more complete picture of the person using that third-party data. And in the later slides, we'll give some examples of some of the data points that they're keeping track of and how precise that it's going to get. So this could include purchasing behavior, census data, etc. Now they actually have whole software and database systems that they have built out to help them keep track of this information, to integrate all the pieces, to be able to segment the data in different ways, to target different segments of the population, to create visualizations and things like that are helpful for non-technical, campaign staff to be able to come to decisions and things like that. And this doesn't just live and die with one campaign. This is something that they're doing all the time. Every election, even a primary, this gets refreshed. So they go back, they download it again, and they see, okay, who turned out, who didn't turn out, et cetera, et cetera. So they're doing this all the time, and these databases are constantly living, expanding, being enriched, and getting better and better. We can go to the next slide. So one of the information that they keep track of is the contact info. So anytime you fill out a form online, it could be a purchase form where you're putting in your email and your phone number, or it could be signing a petition, or it could be anything like that. That data is going to then end up in one of those third-party databases, whether you like it or not. Your data is being tracked and sold all the time. So they'll be able to then use that to get your email address and your cell phone number as well. And part of this is using what are called cookies. If you go to a website and you have to accept or decline the cookies, but most of us just click accept because we aren't really paying attention. Using that, they can actually track, are you a Facebook user? Are you an Instagram user? What are the things, what are you shopping for on Amazon? Like all your history, and our lives now are all online. So if someone has our online history, they can pretty much tell everything they need to know about us. In addition, they can scrape, so one thing that Trump did in 2016, I don't know if you guys have heard of Cambridge Analytica, it's called. They were the pioneers of using social media data for the targeting. So they were scraping people's Facebook accounts to understand what are their personal quirks or whatever. And then they would show them data that was relevant, or show them an ad that was relevant to them that would push their buttons in a certain way. And the funny thing is, they were showing opposite ads to different people. So if someone was, anti-Muslim, they would show them an ad saying Hillary Clinton wants to bring in Muslim migrants or whatever. If someone was pro-Muslim, they would show them an ad saying, oh, Hillary Clinton is, pro-LGBTQ, or she supported the war in Iraq or whatever else. So based on the individual level of preferences, they would show them ads based on, what was the most effective to get the result that they wanted them to see. And like I said, the purchasing records. So some of these are very important, like owning a gun is a huge predictor of your political views and your preferences. So every time you go and, for example, I bought a gun from a hunting rifle, and now I get in the mail, I get ads for all these different things like, come get ammo here or whatever. And so that, clearly that purchasing record information, like I never told the world, hey, I got this, but that information leaked out somewhere. And then they were able to use that to send me those advertisements. Next slide, please. So this is the part that's the most complex, but the most effective, which is using surveys. There are opinion polls that come out all the time, right? You guys have probably seen them. What is Trump's approval rating? What do people believe about this topic or that topic? Voting intentions, those are the surveys, the polls that are tracked all the time. That top line figure is somewhat useful, yes, but what's more useful is the underlying data regarding the survey respondents. For example, if you conduct a survey and you get 500 people responding to that survey, and they're telling you their political views. I support this candidate. I am against this policy. I believe this or don't believe that. And then under the hood, you have those hundreds of data points about not just that sample who responded to the survey, but the whole population of people. And so the trick, if you will, or the technique that they use is they take the survey responses and they use that to map those out to the full population. They're using some kind of vectorization. So like they'll represent each person as a 300 dimensional vector, for example. And then those survey respondents includes some people who are closer to the non-respondent in n-dimensional space. And then based on that, you can kind of guess that, okay, you fall here in this n-dimensional space and the people around you in that space responded this way. Therefore, we can use the survey data to create some kind of educated guess about your beliefs as well. Even though.
Explain that again.
So what they're doing is they're using the survey data. So the population is, let's say, 350 million people, right, in the US. You get a survey back that 500 people responded to. However, those 500 people, you have the same several hundred demographic and other data points about them as you do everyone else, right? Each one of those respondents who said, oh, I support Trump, or I'm against Trump, or I support Israel, I support whatever, you know all the different data points that I'll show later on, like whether they own a gun or not, whether they own a cat or not, whether they, their purchasing history, demographics, their education level, what field they work in, et cetera, et cetera. They have all that information about them. They also have it about the whole population. And so now what you can do is, given the way people responded, create educated guesses for the whole population that, okay, we have this data, we know people are thinking this way. Now for the whole population, we can say, how are people going to, what are their beliefs about these things and how are they going to respond to various things as well.
Okay. Yeah, like splitting them into like clusters of groups. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, clustering is very, very common, yeah. Based on, demographics, education level, et cetera, et cetera. So they run surveys. Yeah, and this is an iterative process, right? Like every time a survey is coming out, they're going back, they're refining their models. And the people that are doing this don't actually have to be the ones that are running the surveys. They can just purchase the surveys from other third-party firms that will hand over all the information and they can just do all the statistics themselves. If we can go to the next. So this is the source for all that infographics. So zooming back out a bit, we can kind of see what's happening, right? There's no democracy. There's no will of the people. None of that is happening. What's happening is it's a kind of ballot harvesting exercise where you have this treasure trove of data and you are like, okay, how do I get the results that I need out of this? And in many cases, they're doing it at a very granular level. Even at like a precinct level, they'll say, okay, in this small block of 500 voters, I know I have 300 people that potentially would vote for my candidate. Now I need to go send them mail, knock on their doors, et cetera, et cetera. What we've actually seen in the last several years is post-COVID with the expansion of the early and the mailed-in balloting. So Trump in 2020 was late to the game. He was against the mail-in voting, and he actually missed out on that. In 2024, they corrected themselves and they realized how powerful that is. What's happening is with the early and the mailed-in voting, the voter files are, in most cases, being refreshed nightly. And so what the Democrats were able to do in 2020 is they expanded out the early voting to like more than a month before even the election date. And now every day they're getting real-time insights into which of their voters are actually turning out, which ones aren't, and therefore which subgroups, demographics are reluctant to come out. How do we change the messaging? How do we reach them? And they were able to use that very effectively in 2020. And Trump got blindsided by that. And he was like, this must be cheating. Although technically some parts of it were cheating because they changed some of the rules without authorization. But overall, they were able to use that more effectively. And then in 2024, the Republicans finally caught on and they started to embrace that as well. And so now this is the new normal. There's no more election day in America. It's election month. The election is in November. Early voting, I think some states starts in September. And so what these campaigns are doing is they're following the data updates in real time and doing all the things they need to do to face their goals of who to turn out. So the next couple of slides, I have some examples on some of the data points. So this is a screenshot from a presentation that Nate Kahn, who's the New York Times data editor, I think, he gave, and he purchased a data set and then he showed his own, just to not have like anyone else's data leak. Like this is an actual example of his entry in that database.
That's one guy.
Yeah, it's one guy. And so these are all between 0 and 1, these scores. So for example, I think this one would be what percentage of the precinct he lives in is white. So 81%. That's like one example. The They have, is he a gun owner? It's unknown. Does he own his home or not? That's another one. If you're a renter versus a homeowner, that's a big predictor of your political beliefs. They have him as a renter, and they have the value of the property that he's renting. He doesn't have any children. He did not vote in 2020 or 2022. They have his date of birth. How likely is he to be a Biden supporter? This is between 0 and 1. They have him at an 86% chance of being a Biden supporter. They have his salary. That's also available. How likely is he to respond to a call on his cell phone? 1% chance. I think mine is below 1%. Landline is even lower. So these are some of the data points that are being tracked. This is just one example.
How do they get the data for how likely is to answer his phone calls?
That's a good question. It's probably just based on the demographics, right? People that live in his area, people that have the same, Jewish people born in the 80s who work in this field.
Polling, or like they have access to how many times we press the decline button or the button?
I think it's probably based on, survey data, they'll probably include everyone they called and then who actually responded, right?
So that's like specific to their calls.
Yeah.
But the provider has all this information, right? Like the service provider.
Yeah, that's possibly, yeah. I don't know exactly that's where they get it from, but.
We agree to all the.
So if you're a campaign staff and you're thinking, okay, I need to get, people that are more than 80% likely to vote for Biden, I need them to get out to the polls. We need to call some people. This guy fits the bill, but he's only 1%, likely to respond to our phone call. Let's not waste our time, right? So they're making those kind of decisions based on these data sets. Next slide is another example. So they'll start to make educated guesses of your beliefs. So this person, do you believe in QAnon? That's that conspiracy theory. For this person, they say no, he doesn't believe in QAnon. Oppose right-wing militias. Who do you blame for inflation? Do you blame immigrants? Do you blame corporations? Do you blame the central banks? Okay, this person blames the corporations. Do you believe in climate change or not? What do you believe about how Amazon treats its workers? That's another. And again, they're making these not for just the survey respondents. They're making these educated guesses for the whole population. Next one. So these are some more examples. So this company, Haystack DNA, they do this as their business. They create these behavioral models from survey data and stuff. So they'll create models for people's beliefs about all these topics. Some examples that I want to call out are do you work from home or do you work in the office? Do you visit movie theaters or do you just watch Netflix at home? Minimum wage, affordable housing, all these things there.
So if you create quality data sets, you can probably sell it to these political campaigns for a good amount.
It's a big business. Next slide.
Yeah, I was going to ask how cheap or expensive to buy this data.
So if you want to buy it from these guys, it's probably going to be based on, they have different levels, right? They have like the basic data sets that they have just the demographic data that don't have all the models on their views and all these things. The more of these you include, the more expensive it's going to be. If you're doing at a national level, probably millions. But if you wanted to just do, for example, in the Buffalo level, it could be for tens of thousands, right? It's not necessarily that expensive. Yeah, these are some more examples of some of the beliefs that they're keeping track of. Crime rates. What are your views on, are crime rates going up or down? That's a hugely important one. Marijuana, gun control, online gaming, et cetera, et cetera. Pardon?
Ukraine.
Yeah, that's a big one too. Do you believe that U.S. should keep supporting Ukraine or not? And I'm sure, this screenshot is old, but I'm sure Israel, Gaza is going to be one of those things that's being tracked as well. So the next slide, if we can go to it. So this is a screenshot from the website of a research firm that sells their services to campaigns. What I want to call out is, so there was something that they said, yeah, so this part, message, movement, and response. So they're not only keeping track of people's beliefs on these certain things, they're keeping track of how much are people moved by messages regarding those topics. So for example, maybe you believe that guns are bad, but you don't really care that much about guns, right? So that's a whole separate variable, is how much are you moved by this topic? So if I'm a campaign, I'm not going to waste my time telling someone who doesn't care that much about guns that guns are bad, right? But this other person that, if I'm able to, my model tells me that they believe that guns are good and they support the Second Amendment, and they also believe that very strongly. And if a candidate aligns with all their other beliefs except for guns, they will not vote for that person, right? That is how strongly they care about it. Then I'm able to highlight that message and target, if I'm the opponent of that candidate, target a person, hey, this person doesn't support the Second Amendment, and then I can influence their behavior that way. So they're modeling not just the views and the opinions, but how people react to certain messages. Where I think this is going in the future is we're not just going to have these individual level data points for everyone. We're going to have graphs, right? Once you take each individual data point and you connect it, because people are social creatures, right? The way people vote or the way people talk about things is highly dependent on who's around them. And so as these, in my opinion, these data and these algorithms, and they evolve more and more and get more and more advanced and sophisticated, what we're going to see is graph databases where you say, this person has a relative who's on Medicare and strongly supports Medicare. Therefore, we can say that this person also supports Medicare, right? In the previous slides, there were some that were about family and military. Do you have a relative who's serving in the U.S. military? If so, you're going to have some strong opinions on the VA being funded. You're going to have strong opinions on U.S. soldiers overseas not being put in harm's way for the sake of Israel, for example. So using the kind of graphs and networks to extract insights on what people believe, I think, is kind of where this is going to go in the long run. So to wrap up, how can we use this data? What are some ideas for how this data can be used by the Muslim community and by the people in this room? So I would say it's not just electoral politics, because electoral politics is limited in terms of, you cannot be a 501c3 if you're doing this. You have to be a 501c4 or a PAC. We can go to the next slide. But these similar techniques, they have applications beyond electoral politics, right? A big one, obviously, is marketing for media. We often measure the impact of a YouTube video or a short by how many people it reached, the view count, and that is a very crude and one-dimensional way of looking at it. If a video goes to 1 million people, it will have much less impact than if a video goes to 1,000 people, but those 1,000 people are the people that it needed to reach, right? So for example, if you're making a video, I know we've talked about making videos about the Hindutva lobby in the US, right? And how that's a danger. Yeah, obviously we can pump that out to the general public, and that's good. But targeting the key demographics who kind of would be moved the most by this message, who would be close to corridors of power or influence or whatever, being able to use that micro-targeting to make that more effective. That, I think, is a huge opportunity that we need to explore. Another one is, nonprofits like this one, like our Masajid or whatever, they often are relying on word of mouth for volunteers and fundraising and those kind of things, using kind of big data, so to speak. And if you go behind the scenes of like some of these really big national nonprofits, like, I don't know, March of Dimes or whatever, like they're all doing stuff like that, like fundraising data, fundraising data, volunteering data, that's all being used by those nonprofits to, solicit people, to try to get volunteers, fundraising, etc. So I think even beyond electoral politics, there is a big scope for these similar things. So the last slide before we open it up for Q&A, I think the most important thing that the Muslim community needs to do in the U.S. is we have to own the data, right? We cannot always rely on these third-party firms because, number one, they're going to make a lot of money off of us. Number two, they may not have the best agendas, right? If they find out that, oh, you're using this for, pro-Palestine calls or whatever, they may not work with you as closely. So I think in the future, we need to have Muslim-run organizations that have their own data teams, that have their own databases that they are storing, either in the cloud or on premises. And I feel like we can do this because we have so many young Muslims that are going into data science. They're going into universities to study data science. They're coming out. They're looking for projects to work on, to get their hands dirty. And so I think we have the skills there. We just gotta, match the skills with the projects. In addition, I think we need to define some low budget goals that we could achieve with this. Obviously, moving voters in elections, AIPAC is spending billions of dollars on that, and it's very hard to compete. However, if you start saying, okay, if I have $10,000 that I want to spend here, what are some low budget but impactful goals that we could achieve with that money? Now, one example that I would want to highlight is in the next election cycle, 2028, there's going to be debates, right? On both sides, Democrat and Republican, the leadership contest is open. And so one potentially, thing we could do is say, how do we get someone on the debate stage who will have a pro-Gaza message or whatever on both sides? And the requirement there's not that much. It's just you need, at least 1% in the polls and 5,000 individual donors. Like they have certain requirements, and that could be done with a low budget, effort. Moving small pieces of the electorate, things like school board elections, like obviously it's very hard to compete on a national scale, but if you just need to get, 500 people to, we have a Muslim running for the school board wherever. I think in Buffalo we have one who's running, right?
Soccer.
In Buffalo.
Oh, in Buffalo, actually.
Yeah, I think Brother Mustafa. Yeah, Mustafa. So being able to say, okay, this is a low turnout election. We just need 500 people to show up. And then, using that data to get those 500 people, you're not going to spend $1 million. It's going to be very low budget, but it'll achieve the goal that you want to achieve. In addition, going after in the political parties, Democrat and Republican, yes, you have the politicians, the congressmen, the senators that are there, but you have underneath them, you have a whole class of people that are, it could be their staffers, their interns, activists, think tanks, profiling who are the people that are, the movers and shakers in these, what are their opinions, how do we reach them, how do we influence them, kind of doing a very small scale micro-targeting of these kinds of people could be done for a lower budget and I think would have an impact. With that being said, it's 12:45, so we'll leave some time for Q&A, comments.
Yep, and just before we go into that, I want to show something that everyone might find interesting. So 1 second here. So speaking of data sets, Yusuf, we're trying to create our own. Western New York conquest. So we're trying to map out the WhatsApp ecosystem in Buffalo. And this is a small list, but we're trying to grow it. So what we're doing is basically listing out each WhatsApp group that's in Buffalo, and then seeing if it's admin controlled or not, what's the chat, or if it's in a community, which community, and which community is this usually, WhatsApp community? Is it usually with Masjid Noor? Is it Jami Masjid? Is it a Somali community? Is it a Sudanese community? Is it a Bengali community? And, which Bengali community? So, and then we have one person inside of each of these people assigned to, basically, target and message them. So, and then, of course, many people are in multiple groups, so you kind of account for that, and you create saying, okay, what's the realistic outreach? Okay, you have 2,000 people, but Hassan decided to multiply it by 0.25. I don't think 0.25, maybe it's 0.5. But either way, and we're adding more and more. We just started this last week, but I think this is a way to at least do a low budget, local collection of data. And then let's say you want to target everyone. Fine, you can target everyone. But then let's say you want to customize your messaging for the Somali community. You want to customize the messaging for people who are associated with Muna. You want to customize messaging for people who are in Jami, right? They each have different, like you said, trigger points.
Right.
So you can send it and have a coordinated effort to do this. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of
We'd have different messages for Darat Tawheed and different messages
exactly.
for
Well, that's exactly my point. Yeah. Okay, so let me open it up to questions for everyone. And by the way, whoever wants to join the effort to map out the Western New York ecosystem, WhatsApp ecosystem in the Muslim community, is welcome to come approach me, Brother Powell, approach Brother Taha, who's also in this chat. Hassan al-Haq is also a part of this effort. Let us know, inshallah. I think Brother Hashim was approached this morning. All right. So let me open it up to and if anyone has any questions, let me check the chat. Okay. So there's a question here. Does public opinion on social media substantially influence this data? If so, something like that can be taken advantage of by boosting content that triggers a decision in our favor. So let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I do feel like social media has become very infiltrated in recent years by like bots and state actors that are trying to push their narratives, as well as organized groups that are trying to push their. But overall, I would say that yes, they do kind of keep track of sentiment analysis and those things online, what the mood is. Traditionally, the campaigns have focused more on social media where your name and your location is attached to it. So more for like Facebook and LinkedIn, less Twitter and those types of things, or TikTok, where people are going to be using like a pseudonym. I'm sure there are ways, given an email address, to find what are the actual accounts that are associated with that person, even if they're anonymous. I'm sure those databases are out there, so I think they would be doing that.
Got it.
I was just curious, if somebody search on the internet some opinions and the opposite opinions, how you can find out which one they are inclined to. You know what I mean? Like from their search history, they have this opinion and the opposite opinion. You will say unknown, I'm just curious question.
So in that case, they would probably just rely on whatever other data they have about that person to kind of, it's like a Bayesian, where you have a prior and then you have the new data and then you adjust the prior based on Bayesian inference.
The percentage is by this way.
Yeah, all these things are it's a number between 0 and 1, right? So your support for Medicare, they'll have a number between 0 and 1 that kind of encapsulates where they think you are on that spectrum.
I think they take a lot of things into consideration. Not only the search, they also keep track of how much time you're. They also keep track on how much time you're spending on a particular video, and what kind of video it is, and also what kind of things you like, you dislike. So we have different type of reactions like angry, sad, those. So all these are data points which they use. So there's a lot going on background.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is.
Do they track your IP? Let's say you don't have a YouTube account, so your name is not public, but you just.
Yeah, if you accept the cookies when you go on the website, then they're tracking.
What if you deny?
IP is a basic thing, so most of the websites take it. So even if you reject the cookies, there are few cookies which are important.
Oh.
So I think IP address comes under that.
So you get the ads for the VPN.
What if you use a VPN? Yeah.
I'm sure there are ways to like make yourself an, but the average person is not doing that, right? Like 90.9%. Yeah.
Even trying to hide it.
Yeah. Because most people don't even know that their name is in that voter file. They don't even know that step, let alone all the other things that are happening after that. Like, most people don't know that they can tell if you voted or not in the last election. Like, that's a public information. They don't know that. Yeah.
Anyone online have any questions? Go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask a question.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. I just wanted to say, first of all, Yusuf, may Allah bless you. I think, for all the scientists here, I loved your presentation. Very clinical, very effective. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep thinking the way that you're thinking. I think, first of all, just a few words of encouragement for you. MashaAllah, I think we're blessed to have someone like you in our community to think clinically like this. I think, wallahi, the stuff you gave us, I think, is gem. We'll obviously save the slides. But just out of curiosity, this what we're staring at right now, the action items. So I know you talked a little bit about owning the data. Could you expound a tiny bit on it? So, for example, I know you did, but a little bit more on it. So, is it within the scope of what you're saying to be one of these or to have one of these third-party farms, or can we buy it? Can we, buy such firms out, own it like that? Or, what are the various modalities here that you can think of?
So I would separate national versus local. I think if we're doing data collection at the local level, Western New York, like the people in this room, like we can kind of put our resources together. I did pitch some national organizations. Like I know there was this one group called Abandon Harris that was active last year. Yeah. And they're still trying to figure out what they're doing next. But I pitched them on this. I was like, this is what you need to get into is the data. And so I would hope that one of those national organizations can kind of take that over at a national scale and start to do some of the big things.
Do you have any clarity on what Mamdani is doing?
So what I've seen from these certain Muslim politicians like Mamdani as well as Rashid Taleb and Ilhan Omar is when you actually go to this whole ecosystem behind the scenes, there are different data firms there's very few that are neutral. Most of them have some kind of affiliation either with the mainstream centrist Democrats, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, the neocon Republicans, the America First Republicans. Like each one of those tribes has their own set of players that they're playing with. And what these politicians like Mamdani and Rashid Taleb and whatever Ilhan Omar have done, they've plugged into the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. That has its own set of organizations and, data firms that are helping them out. here's how to get the votes, here's the insights into the data, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And so they plugged into that, which is helping them win elections.
Mm-hmm.
But that also comes with a set of compromises, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because
Yeah.
they own the data, they're relying on this other group
Mm-hmm.
who expect them to also, make certain compromises on various issues.
Absolutely, and that makes sense. I mean, on both ends. One, which is that they're plugging into these resources, and obviously, secondly, they're compromising. So, just to finish off with my train of thought, which is, from what you can see or understand, do you see any movement or any kind of initiative by any Muslim organizations or whatever to do this first step, which is to own the data, to create their own kind of ecosystem? So one of the things that, for example, when you explained what you did in the last 45 minutes, alhamdulillah, it's clinical, but it stares at you in the face. You're like, this is so obvious. So I'm just thinking, like, aren't there other bigger mover and shakers who are finding it also obvious and kind of starting to make inroads? Like, can you sense or see any of that in terms of the Muslim communities, like Dallas, for example? I'm not,
Mm-hmm. I think most likely there are, but the Muslim community, we tend to be very last minute.
Oh yeah.
We don't necessarily think long term. It's when something is upon us, we just react. Like, for example, for this whole debate thing that I mentioned, what's going to happen is, that first debate in, let's say, July 2027, a week before that, you're going to see some petitions being sent online. Hey, get this person onto the stage. Whereas the time to start planning for it is now, and then gather the data, what needs to be done, how do we employ our resources and achieve whatever result. So I think there is that movement, but, we tend to be very last minute and we don't think far enough ahead.
Right. Jazakallah khair, bro.
I have a question here?
I think so. I know legally, right, we have a definition of what's public information and what's private information. But now with, AI and Sora 2 from OpenAI, you could take picture and video of someone, a good amount of angles, and you can have this person, commit a crime. This person was never even there. Do you think those definitions will change with these new technologies that are coming out?
So the question was about kind of the manipulated AI images and videos. I think that will become another data point in the list of data points that is being used. How good is this person at recognizing AI generated slop?
Not good. A lot of.
Does this person on Facebook, do they react? Do they thumbs up the AI generated videos often? Right? And so that's another data point that can be used to push that message.
There was another comment here. Let me see. That's funny. I was in the abandoned Harris board of directors. Oh.
yeah, Salman. Yeah, I think I've seen you in that. We need to push those people to go in that direction.
Gotcha. Any other questions from here or online? You can unmute your mic if you're online, or if you're, you can just speak up. So I have one. So, you're saying, okay, there's no democracy and it's just, harvesting ballots, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you, but let's say I want to play the opposite end. Well, it's still mass politics at the end of the day, right? You have to engage with the people versus engaging with the oligarchy. Here they're actually making an effort to reach out to people and influence them and have them think in a particular way, right? Is that not better than, you have no influence at all except for these, 100 people in the entire country, and they're the ones you have to influence versus everyone else.
So you mean compared to like the machine politics era of the past?
Right. So when you say no democracy, like, it's kind of, it is democracy, right? Because it's mass politics. You're trying to, push people to think in a certain way. It's just people playing that game. I think maybe what you mean is it's just a free for all where people kind of vote the way they want to without any influence or bias. But I guess maybe you're saying most people are sheep. Most
Right,
people
yeah.
are very gullible, so you can push their buttons a certain way and they can be moved. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and when the original democracy was invented, it was very limited, right? You had to be kind of from a certain social status. You had to be a free adult male property owner, I think, also. It was limited to the elites, even at that time. And what that did is that it kind of created a system that was in some ways more, I wouldn't say robust, but it was unpredictable, right? Mm-hmm. For example, in the early, if you look at U.S. history, the first 100 years, there were so many debates on the floors of Congress that going into it, you didn't know what position each congressman was going to take. They would sit there, they would debate, they would learn about the issues, and then at the end, hold the vote. Nowadays, it's already, where everyone stands. They can sit there, they can hold the debate, it doesn't matter because everything is already predetermined. So there's something to be said about having a more pure system where you limited it to certain people, and that creates more room for genuine conversation. Whereas in the mass politics era, it becomes very algorithmic and kind of mechanistic. Which one is better or worse?
So you're saying there's more ability for policies to change if it's limited versus not?
And it's more possible to change via moral arguments and persuasion and things like that. Mm-hmm. For example, in the machine politics era, you wanted to get a policy change, you just go talk to the boss of, Tammany Hall or whoever the political machine was, one-to-one, you convince him, boom, you got what you need to be done, mm-hmm. right? Whereas now you can make a moral argument, but the other side has the data and the algorithms and AI. Well, good luck. You're going to lose.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yusuf, can I just ask one thing and move this out? And so, for example, Imam Tom Fakini, as you know, he's more invested now. He says it flat out these days that, he's more interested in raising institutions. I think what he says, 3, 5, 10 years, that's too long, 3 or 5 years even, with, for example, the clarity that you laid down. I'm just thinking, for example, governance and data and law in top schools like George Washington University and all these institutions. I think is a whole disruption that's already in the works. Will probably take place in terms of a new generation of individuals coming out, leading the show, etc. 3 to 5 years. In your opinion, given that, mashallah, you spent some time thinking about these things deeply and also looking at them technically and clinically, what's your prediction for the next 3-5 years, and where can we? I mean, you've already laid out some game plans, but I think, given the fact that how you started, right? Democracy is a farce. It really is. So, given that fact that, coming back to a more pure type of democracy and how we can have a seat in the table, what are our institutions? I mean, is it kind of in your opinion that we create an ecosystem within this larger ecosystem that is, connected surely to the larger ecosystem in certain ways, but also kind of self-subsisting and has its own attraction in terms of, not giving into these base kind of, reactions. What's your take for the next 3-5 years and where we should be?
Yeah, I think in terms of the Muslim community, the way we think about these things is evolving. And I feel like it's maturing as well. In the past, we would often hear about this idea of the Muslim vote. How do we get the Muslim community to register, to vote, and turn out, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like we've matured beyond that concept, and we're becoming more results oriented. I don't care, even if 0 Muslims register to vote, it shouldn't matter, right? What should matter is what's the result, and then how do you drive the data to get to the result that you want, whatever that looks like, right? And that's kind of how these other groups, like we're seeing the rise of other lobbying groups, not just APAC, that are doing all the same techniques. One example.
Yeah, like the Hindutva, right?
Pardon?
The Hindutva, right?
Yeah, they're another big one too. One example I wanted to give was the cryptocurrency lobby. So in the last election, 2024, there was a congressman from Ohio who wanted to regulate cryptocurrencies. And these crypto guys, they got together, they made their own lobbying group, and they did all this stuff about data, etc. They realized that motivating people based on cryptocurrency is not going to work because the data is telling us that this is an irrelevant topic to most people. Instead, what they did is they went through the data and they said, okay, I have these people here who have these views on education or healthcare or whatever. I'll send them a text message or whatever saying, hey, this politician voted against whatever bill that was going to be for education or healthcare or whatever it was. So they showed people messages based on the result they were trying to drive, and they were able to unseat that politician.
They blackmailed him, huh? Kind of.
And now Trump is making the crypto reserve. He's buying Bitcoins. He's pumping. So they got the result they wanted, right? They didn't even have to say, guys, don't vote for this person because he's bad for crypto or whatever. Like, they didn't even have to say that. They had a very results-oriented mindset, and they got the result they wanted just by doing that. And that politician and his staff, they know what was happening. The average person doesn't. The average person is getting a postcard in the mail or an email or a text or a phone call or whatever saying, hey, this politician is bad for whatever issue you care about. They don't know that the person paying for this is the cryptocurrency lobby, right? They have no idea.
Interesting.
So to go back to the original question, I feel like the Muslim community is and should be maturing towards a more results-oriented approach rather than vote for the sake of voting or whatever else like that. I think is an immature concept.
So basically appealing to people for what they care about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, okay. So I know we're reaching our, we've actually passed the hour, but any other last minute questions, comments from anyone here or anyone who've joined us? Let me see if there's any other comments here. Okay. All right. If that's it, and no more questions or comments or anything else, then inshallah, jazakallah khair for joining. And any last comments about you, Yusuf? No? Okay. Jazakallah khair, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.